Hello, everyone. My name is Igor Tomic, and today you're looking at a new episode of the Fintech Garden. And I'm really pleased to introduce Theodora Lau, who is by American Banker is top 20 most influential women in fintech. Hello, Theodora. How are you today?
Good. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. Look forward to the discussion.
Yeah, it's a really good opportunity to kind of overlap two words because your podcast is really amazing. And I suggest to our listeners to at least check what is going on there. So please follow in LinkedIn and see the episodes with Theo. And today I would like to discuss the shift that we all see in banking and the topic that we kind of collaborated today is actually the future of digital banks in AI native era. And AI is here, AI is there. So we will try to dig and understand what does it mean actually from maybe building the platforms for digital banks or operating them, and how the customers potentially will see the shift we saw maybe 10, 15 years ago with the mobile development. That's a topic. How do you feel about this, Tao?
I'm looking forward to it. I think the world is very interesting. There's so many shifts and things that's happening, and I think we're in a perfect time. One might say it's an inflection point. That sounds cliche, but
I think it's really hard to say being in the moment. I still remember those times when the mobile engineer was just jumping in. And I remember the first time when I was pitching the mobile or showing the first iPhone to my employee. And I was saying like, oh, it's a huge platform. You see, you can do the multi-touch piano. You can play. And I installed not through the Apple Store, but through the installer, like a hacked version. They said, I don't care. What is it for? Like, no one is going to use it. And fairly, there is no such thing as like a turning point. Usually people living in this moment, they don't have enough context. If I would compare to for the mobile computing or the mobiles coming in, no one understood the impact of Instagram, which was sold for just $1 billion of dollars. No one understood the shift, and even with the Microsoft, when a lot of people they assumed if there is no keyboard, there is no future for the mobile device. But you said that we feel that the data or AI is changing. Like maybe what is your feeling? What your guts are saying that is changing the world, how we're doing the banking?
I like your analogy. I've been using that quite a bit actually, because I came from telco, so I came from the mobile world. So if we look back at the iPhone moments, right? In my last book, I talk quite a bit about, I feel like we are in the iPhone moment for AI. It's precisely that. So back in 2006, 2007, that was when the iPhone came about. And I remember I was working for a mobile carrier at that time, a different one, not the one that was carrying the iPhone for exclusivity at that time. And I saw the phone. I'm like, oh my God, this is cool, right? You didn't have a keyboard. It's a whole new form factor, a different way of thinking about using a device. And I got so giddy, I went to the store and actually lined up to get the phone on the first day because I was so excited. At that time, the only app I had was the weather app. And for some strange reason, I was so excited. I just kept checking the weather. I'm like, oh my God, this is like real time. You can look at the weather, you can look at weather from different places. Now, thinking back, that sounds really silly. But I remember bringing it with me on an overseas trip a week after. I came back with over $300 of USD of roaming charges. Because remember back in those days, right? We're not used to carrying a phone. We're not used to consuming so much data. And that little bit of information exchange with the app at that time, it just opened my eyes, I guess, for what you could do and how you could take the data and surface things in a different way to get users excited. So when you bring that forward to now 2026, right? We think about AI, despite the technology being embedded in our systems for so long, there are still people that are a little bit skeptical. And then there are the other bunch of us that are absolutely overjoyed by the possibility of it. So it reminds me of that. When we think about the foundation, we think about how these mobile devices have become so useful because it knows our habits, because we bring them with us, because it's able to bring all of the information in our ecosphere, if you will, and orchestrate it in a way that different applications can use it and orchestrate it in a way that can service it to the users and the user experience. Same for AI, right? I think what is very fascinating with AI is it has the opportunity for us to orchestrate the data that the banking systems have, bring it to a level that different applications can use it for different needs to serve the special requirements of the users. In our ecosystem, we like to think a lot about here are the things that banks need. We sell products. we don't often think the other way around, which is what do the users want? And how do we then meet them in the middle? And I think this is the time that allow us to do that, to personalize in a way that is useful for consumers, helping them stay connected and create something that is contextual, obviously, with permission data being an important part of it.
So true. And I feel like if I would try to explain and define the shift with the mobile, it became from business oriented into API oriented because you started to consume APIs. It's not a mobile application, it's more one application is talking to another one. But the step that we're missing, what do we know about the customer who's using those APIs? So it's maybe about me, what I need at this moment when I'm asking for something, rather than the business case in generic one. Like I need to comply with a lot of forms, inputs, outputs. Like I can ask, can you do the payment? And I don't need to explain which way, which type, which currency, which payment gateway. So it becomes more and more contextual and more personalized. I was trying to think about this process for a while. And what I'm trying to understand, will it impose the changes for the data and how the data is processed by financial organizations? Because when I'm buying something in the store, right now, even with the card, you cannot tell what is the purpose of the transaction. Am I buying something for dinner? Am I buying certain goods at retail? Does it mean that banks, institutions, platforms, they will be forced to understand more about customer intents rather than mechanics of the financial transactions?
I like that a lot. I think intention is, it will make it more interesting because then from their perspective, that's also a way for them to create more value, right, for consumers. If we think about why do I go with this particular institution versus the other institution? It used to be, well, because this one has a digital or mobile app, this one doesn't. Well, I think a lot of those are now table stakes, right? And so when you start thinking the next level up is how can this particular financial institution help me stretch my money, help me plan better, help me, give me something that is more useful than just paying for something, right? And so, to your point, if it can understand where I am from a life stage perspective, if it can understand why I'm buying certain things, and then extend it out to what else could I need, right? How can you be more useful and meet me where I am at the point when I need you? I think that will be amazing if we can do that.
To the practical level, what do you think the banks should do for the next 2, 3 years? Because that's a lot of work to understand the customer data and to propose the proper business context. So, what do you think banks should start doing right now?
That's a very interesting question. It depends on where the banks are coming from, what size they are, and what they're trying to do. I think first and foremost, we talk a lot about fragmentation. We talk a lot about data being siloed. And I think that is the first thing that we need to solve, because when your data is in, let's say, spread between 20, 30 different systems, and every time when someone comes in for a question and they need something and you need to ping multiple systems and go through multiple steps in order to service the customer, that is not ideal. And that's also not being able to leverage the technology to the fullest extent. So getting the data foundation right, bringing them together instead of having them in silo, I think that's absolutely foremost. What is just data strategy is what I'll start asking. And I think beyond that is then start looking at your system. Are they updated? Are they, are they at a state where, that you are able to service people that they need? People are very impatient nowadays. We want everything now. We want everything real time. So how do you create a way to understand your customers from beginning to end, and how are you able to respond to their needs when they need them? I think that's the other thing. Those two, I think you will need to start right away. And I don't think it's all about technical as well, right? So to be able to change to a way that you can meet customers where they are, I think there are organizational things we need to change. There are cultural and training we need to change. We talk a lot about AI. A lot of organizations, not just in banking but beyond, they talk a lot about how they want to leverage AI in the future, the workforce of the future. Well, you need to start training people for it. You need to start thinking about what does the org look like. Maybe you need to reorganize in a way that you can leverage the technology. Maybe you need to think about reskilling and upskilling. So there's a lot of things that needs to be done.
And you mentioned the silos and data, like data lakes or data warehouse. I think it become more and more standard, But I would like to touch maybe one aspect that I'm thinking, because if you take a look how the taxi has changed, it's not about different business process. Like we used to call by phone, and the car is coming to the place, and then you are getting from A to B. But what Uber changed, or applications like that, how we actually interacted, like you're no longer talking with the person, and the biggest change, you have a transparency of the process. So basically, in your application, you see that someone picked up, there is an estimated time to pick you up, and then you see like a turn by turn, or on the map, you see the whole flow, path, and destination, the cost. But it means that the system should have reliable information about the business process. And I feel sometimes like at the financial institution, they don't have that. Do you share this feeling? Do they need to do more on kind of visibility and transparency on the business processes in financial institutions?
I think as an industry that is needed, regardless of whether or not you have AI or no AI. The one key thing that we tend to forget is that it is a regulated industry, right? So let's say you're doing lending, right? It goes without saying, even when you're just using human judgment, you still kind of need to make sure that you have the audit trails, you know what decisions are made and why. Same with, if you replace that with an algorithm to help you decide, you still need to have human in the loop. Or recently I heard is an expert in the loop, so to speak. So you can use technology to help you streamline your processes to a certain point. At the end of the day, you still need to make sure that you have transparency, as you say, how the decision is being derived from, what data is being used to get there, and if you can explain it to the regulators, right? So with or without AI, I think that that's important. I think the one thing I would like to add is that that's how people would trust you. That's how they will come to trust your institution. One of the analogy I like to use is driving on the highway, right? When you're driving on the road, you need traffic rules, you need speed limits, you need to obey traffic signals. And if you don't, people will probably not be as likely to be willing to adopt the highway or drive on that particular road. So same with a financial institution, right? If they can trust that you are making the right decisions and you have the guardrails to keep them safe, that's how you can attract people to adopt you.
That's true, and I'm definitely with you with the part between regulations and like the business process. But what I feel, at least from my experience, sometimes it's unmild with the customer. So it's not about having or not having information; it's not having its DNA to explain the customer what is going on. Like, believe me, how many times you go to your retail bank, you're creating the payment, and then you don't know what is happening. Like it might deduct or not, it might create the transaction or not. You might see it in your list as a pending or not. And then in 3 days, your business partner is asking, like, Igor, did you dispatch the payment? And like, I need to go and check because fairly, I have no idea what is happening. And with the neobanks or digital banks, the experience is totally different. It says, okay, the order received, we're processing, additional documents requested, etc., etc. So is it changing the way how the business is structuring the communication with the customer because it becomes more customer centric?
Maybe. I think it's hard to do a generic, say, all of the incumbents are doing a bad job and, the startups are doing a better job. I think, as with every industry, there are some better ones and there are some, not as good ones. But, as always, when you have more competition, you have it kind of push each other to do more. And that's always a good thing for consumers.
Okay, it makes sense. And what, from your view, how the AI native bank should look like in terms of functionality? Because is it still mobile app? Is it chatbot? Like, if we imagine, imagine ourselves in 5, 10 years, how potentially it should look like.
I think for the first thing is, I would say the way we interact with that particular institution is different. It doesn't always have to be a mobile app. It doesn't always have to be a chatbot. By being AI native means that, if you ask me, that means that, it will understand me better. It will have the data that it needs, not just at a particular point in time, but a little bit broader, understand the context, and to be able to anticipate what I will need instead of always being reactionary. So that's how I would envision an AI native bank to be, is knowing what does my financial life look like, rather than just thinking about, oh, can I give you a current account? Can I give you a savings account? Can I give you, right? So it's the approach is different. That's how I would assume an AI native bank will be like. It could be, a mobile app. It could be a bot on the mobile app. It could be multi-channel. A lot of that is still being imagined. I would say is meeting customers where they are. That is the most important one. So it could be, someone who's used to using the app to communicate, or it could be someone, dare say, like to go to a branch to interact for certain situations. I don't think that is either or. It's basically understanding what people need and to be able to provide them what they need when they need it and anticipate before they need it.
Like maybe from opposite direction, like what do you think banks should opposite or not implement AI in? Because maybe there are some areas where we should keep clean maybe from AI. Like is there anything that should is not worth actually to go and start with AI?
I think it depends on what you're doing, right? When we say bank, it's fairly generic and huge. People typically think about when it comes to, for example, wealth management, certain decisions shouldn't be, through a digital assistant. It should be, human in there. For example, credit decisioning, right? We can have the technology up to a certain point, and it's always important to have a person, in the loop as the final checkpoint. So I think it really depends on different use cases and depends on the organization that you're in. But at the end of the day, the rule of thumb always is, if you need to go in front of the regulator, can you defend your decision, regardless of which process it is? If you can, then that's probably good. If you cannot, well, then you probably need to rethink where you're having the machine, where you're having the human. Also, I would say it also depends on the people you're interacting with. I've heard, actually, this is quite interesting, coming out from multiple credit unions in the US, where, we're all trying to implement bot, if you will, to try to address people's questions. Now, there are certain demographics that they call the call center not because they have a question, not because they, want to check their balance or they want to do certain things. They just want to talk to a human being, right? So again, I think it really depends on the scenario and who you are actually and who you're serving.
It's definitely different because actually I have an experience with the Wells Fargo, and was really surprised as an engineer that an ability to dispatch the wire transfer or even local ACH transfer appeared in mobile application just in 2018. And most of the time, you're doing the phone call to initiate the payment. So you're not going to the branch, but talking through the phone with your bank. It's something in DNA, basically in the United States. And I don't think it's even about demographics. It's like the inertia of doing the same things over and over for decades, and it will be hard. But I'm thinking about the moment that actually AI and chatbots or voice bots, they're becoming so good that maybe most of the time you're already talking not with the real human, but with some AI application, because definitely it's visible. Even last year, Zuckerberg, he told that for Meta, it's potentially possible to implement the support with AI because last, I don't know, 5 years, it wasn't visible because of the cost. But right now, 90% of the questions through the support, they can be resolved with the chatbots. And then 10% like of those requests, which should be handled by people, it makes sense financially. So maybe it's more the way how we're interacting rather than who we are interacted with.
I respectfully disagree. Would you like to
Okay, that's
replace
good.
yourself with a bot and have the bot interview me? I would say I do not want to talk to a bot. Right. So there are certain human elements that I don't think is always a good idea to replace, just like you wouldn't go out with a robot to a coffee shop. There are people who, prefer to talk to a human being. And I don't think that's a good or bad thing. And I don't think it's one of those that, because they're used to talking to a human and it's inertia. I think it's a very distinctly human thing that I think sometimes we should treasure more.
That's absolutely true. And when we're talking about the personal communication, because I would say for me personally, there is a big difference between something commoditized or personal. If I would like to talk with my friends, it's definitely about the friends rather than communication. But if I would like to resolve missing package from my e-commerce delivery, yes, it would be good to have a human, but in the end of the day, if I'm talking, interacting with a human being, and then it's kind of resolved, does it make a big difference? Will I ever know this difference if it goes the same way as with the human?
Because you're not lonely. That's what I'm trying to
Maybe.
get to. A lot of the
Okay.
people that are calling the credit unions in the
Uh-huh.
call center is not because they actually have a question. It's because they want to talk to people.
Good point. It's worth to know. Let's maybe go a little bit beyond, like when the customer asks AI before they ask their bank, what does it mean for the future of the banks? Are they wanting like this element of communication more? Do they seek for better tech? Like, because it kind of shows that there is a demand of communication, but is it better tech or more deep and warm connection here with the between institution and the customer?
I think I'll take this question one step further. Are they actually asking the bank, or are they asking something else or someone else? Right. So, because I think that's a big shift that we're talking about. The shift is banks are becoming a little bit more irrelevant compared to before. Because now you have, for those who prefer, you have the cloud, you have Perplexity, you have ChatGPT, you have all kinds of tools that you can ask information that previously did not exist before, right? Because before we would ask friends, we would check social media, and now you have one additional tool that some people, not saying it's a good idea, but some people would actually upload their financial information and say, hey, help me plan a path forward, or help me improve my credit score, or help me reduce my debt, right? So previously they could only ask their financial advisor or a bank for such information. But now you can ask different tools. You can say, hey, find me the best digital bank that can provide me with this particular service that I'm looking for. And the entire conversation is between the user, the frontier AI model that they're using. Banks are not anywhere in the loop. And so the question then becomes bigger than what you're asking, which is, are banks going to be relevant? And if they do not show up in the answers that these AI tools provide, then what should they do? Because then, when you think about positioning, it's not so much so the bank trying to push their relevancy in front of people. It's not so much so what products are they offering, because if they aren't even showing up, they're not in front of the screens, whatever that the consumer is looking for, then how are you going to be able to break through that?
That's an awesome question. And I can refer to the episode with Lexicon, and we were discussing AI and future of the financial institutions, the blockchain. He said really astonishing phrase like the high street banks, they're named because they used to own the streets. Because basically the bank is on the same street which they given the loans, where the customer are, and the traffic is coming to them. What changed in the mobile era, the banks doesn't own the streets where they are located. So basically big tech is controlling either your application is going to be approved into the store, is it compliant with the human interface, guidelines, etc., which is pushing then the question, who is going to be the door for your financial instruments? Because if you're going to interact with the AI in different ways, it doesn't matter, chat, voice, whatever, in the future, who is going to own the street where the banks are? Is it Apple? Is it Anthropic? Is it OpenAI? Like, what does it mean then to be bank in those times?
Exactly. Right. So I think the whole model is shifted upside down. Or maybe, it's not so much so about OpenAI being the institution, but it could be whoever that they're connecting up to, whoever they're promoting, right? That they have special relationship with. So, you surface them more in the responses. So we don't know. Right. And I think the we don't know is opening up a whole new frontier to how we think about being in front of the customers, and what does that mean? So, for example, in the US, there's a JD Power report that came out recently that talked about 53% of consumers are now using AI tools to ask for financial advice, right? 53%, that's a lot. So over half of the people are already experimenting with these tools and asking all kinds of financial questions. So if I were a fintech, it's not just a bank, right? If I were a fintech, how do I make sure that I show up in these responses?
It's a whole new world. Right now, even the advertisement doesn't exist, no rules. It's basically Wild West.
Advertising doesn't work, right? Like, think about, even if you have some sort of marketing messages in your app, doesn't matter who you are, and says, oh, it's summer vacation coming here, or, it's almost uni season. Come open up a new account for your, for your child who's going to university. Well, guess what? The agent's not going to be clicking on, a message. An AI agent's not going to see a message, right? Then how do you then get the message over to your prospective customer?
That's why I'm talking about the streets. Like, it's not about messages that you form and connection with your customer. It's only the street where your customers are. And since they are not on the old streets anymore, they're not opening the applications, they disable notifications, they're not reviewing what's happening. They upload in CSV file to another LLM and asking about their well-being. what do you think? What are going to be the drivers? Because okay, I don't think that at this stage it feels like the LLMs or AI companies they're pursuing the financial licenses. Even the story with the
They
Google
don't need
Anthropic
to.
page, they don't need to. But like, what are the values then for the financial institutions for like that they can propose in those new times for their customers? What they should focus on?
I don't know. I think we're all trying to figure out, right? So instead of SEO, there's now the new term of GEO. How do you show up, right? And I don't think anyone has the answer. Or if you do, you'll be the next billionaire.
It's really hard right now to predict how it will work, but definitely it will be formed in next 2-3 years as a process, because the same were with the Google, like there were catalogs and it was clear what to do, but then Google search came in a couple of years it started to be quite clear what to do to be promoted. So I think we're living in the same kind of approach. So we are right now in Wild West when the things are forming, but since it will get into the shape, it will be clear what is influencing, is this payment, paid advertisement, or how to work with this. So I think it will be established and well defined. And since we're moving into the last part of our podcast, like I'm usually asking this question, what I didn't ask you today, what you would like to answer to our audience?
The one thing that is always top of mind when I think about technology, when I think about, where we're going next, is who's being left behind. And that's one thing I don't think we're asking enough about, nor were we spending enough time about, right? Just like earlier when you were talking about, we can automate different things. We can use chatbots to answer questions. We can use AI to do a whole lot of things. Are we able to use that technology to address the needs for everyone? Or are we focusing so much on what we can automate that we forget about the rest of the people, right? Just like what I was talking about, the people that, don't want to interact with technology for whatever reason, or the people that are working in financial institutions whose roles get, automated away. How are we addressing their needs? How are we creating a future that everyone can look forward to? I don't think as a society we're doing enough to look at that from a long view perspective. Even when we're talking about AI, even when we're talking about deploying AI in financial institutions, if you look at most of the surveys, most of the reports talk about efficiency gains. Most of the reports talking about streamlining operations. Most companies, press release announcements talk about, how they're able to do more with less. And increasingly, we're seeing more and more layoffs, right? Big banks laying off, 10, 15,000 people, smaller institutions laying off a couple of thousand here, there. Okay. I mean, we can look at, shareholder value. Obviously, we can look at, how can we create a more sustainable business model for organizations? Yes, all of that is true. But are we going to a point where that's all we're focusing on, and we're not thinking about the rest of the people that we leave behind? I think it needs to be a balance.
That's a good answer for the end of the episode. I think that's something that you can take away and then think for a moment after viewing this episode. Thank you for answering this question. It's definitely a really good one. Like, what we're leaving behind it, or what we're leaving after us. Like, when the project is done, it's delivered, deployed, and the customer is using. Like, is it the result that we wanted to achieve, or there is something more that we need to think about? So, thank you, Theo, for this discussion. It was a really nice one. I really enjoyed the questions and answers that we had today. It's a pleasure, and I'm definitely looking forward to have more episodes with you. And I would like to pick up your mind for other topics too.
Thank you so much for having me. It's lovely to chat with you, this time with a little bit more time compared to last time when we were in London. So appreciate you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for looking at us till the end. Please follow us on the social networks, comment, and we're looking forward to see you on next episodes.